What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the One and Gold Talk podcast. Joining me, you know him, you love him, Chris Fedor. And Chris, another NBA draft has come and gone, and we are talking about the latest selections for the Cleveland Cavaliers. The number 49 overall selection and the number 58 overall pick, Tyrese Proctor and Saliou Niang. And Chris, obviously we know Tyrese Proctor, an Australian native, is from Duke University. And he's a guy that played 3 years at the collegiate level. He's a guy that the Cavs could see as a replacement for Sam Merrill. But I wanted to know a little bit more of his draft process. Chris, there were rumors, some murmurs, that he and his representation might have forced his way to Cleveland a little bit. A guy that was projected to be a top 30 pick fell all the way to 49. What are you hearing on the situation?
Well, look, when I was starting this whole process, this pre-draft process, and trying to get a gauge of what direction the Cavs were going to go at 49 and 58, Ethan, it was really hard to nail down because nobody knew who was going to be there. You're talking about 48 guys have to come off the board before you really start to think about, okay, this guy makes sense for the Cavs. This guy's going to come in for a workout because he believes he's still going to be on the board. So it was kind of tricky from the Cavs perspective. And if you look at a lot of the guys that they brought in for workouts, very few of them were top 30 prospects. Very few of them, if any, were top 35 prospects, because a lot of these guys feel like, hey, we're going to go higher, or a lot of these representatives for these players are looking at it saying, why am I going to waste my time doing a 3-on-3 workout in Cleveland when you guys have the 49th pick and the 58th pick? Give me some assurances that you're going to move up in the draft, or whatever the case may be. So it was a different pre-draft process from the Cavs perspective. But when I was doing my due diligence, during the start of this process, I asked a bunch of different people, a bunch of different sources, okay, give me a few different guys to keep an eye on when it comes to the Cavs at pick number 49. And I talked to as many people as I can possibly talk to in and around the NBA. But the one consistent name that continued to come up was Tyrese Proctor. So it's clear that the Cavs have liked Tyrese for a number of years. They obviously have an Australian pipeline. On top of that, this is somebody who, when he came to Duke, there were some kinds of thoughts of maybe one and done. Maybe he's that kind of talent. He ended up staying 3 years. The Cavs watched him in person. They know people at the Duke program, obviously. So they did their homework on him. They've been watching him for years. And I think it also kind of fits into the fact of, I don't want to say an immediate replacement for anybody on the roster, because we're talking about a 49th overall pick. But remember last year when I wrote about it and we talked about it on the podcast, I said, hey, Jalen Tyson, 20th overall pick, maybe not right now, but an eventual replacement for Caris LeVert. I think we can honestly look at this roster the way that it's made up right now, and we can look at Tyrese Proctor and his skill set, and we can say, maybe an eventual replacement for either Ty Jerome or Sam Merrill. And I say either one because Tyrese can play on the ball too. He can run pick and roll. He can organize your offense. He can be a secondary or tertiary playmaker. So he brings some multi-positional versatility. And if you're looking at it from his perspective, if he's not going to go in the first round, and you're talking about some of these second-round destinations, a lot of these things are going to be the same, and some of these may only be offering a two-way contract. So I think from his perspective, the Cavs offering a standard multi-year NBA contract and giving him a full-time roster spot, knowing that the Cavs had that open, that is appealing to Tyrese and people around him. Right? Knowing the fact that the Cavs are a team that is coming off back-to-back Eastern Conference semifinals appearances, and knowing that they're going into this year, however you feel about the Cavs, they are considered one of the favorites to win an NBA championship. That's appealing from Tyrese's standpoint as well. So I would not be surprised if his people looked at the situation and said, "Hey, if we fall out of the first round, where could we go that is going to be a good opportunity for us?" And I wouldn't be surprised if they looked at the Cavs and they said, "Hey, going to Cleveland would be a really good opportunity, even if it means falling more spots and going 49th as opposed to 34th, or going 49th as opposed to 40th. If we're going to get a standard multi-year contract, and if we're going to get an NBA roster spot, who cares about those 9 slots? Who cares about those 15 slots? Go to the best opportunity where you can earn the second NBA contract, not the first NBA contract, and maybe have a little bit more staying power than some of these second round picks."
This is an interesting situation for Tyrese Proctor, and obviously it shows a little bit of behind the scenes to what NBA prospects are thinking about and their mindsets coming in. But obviously, as you mentioned, as you reported, Chris, Tyrese Proctor is getting a multi-year deal. This is not just a standard deal, which we already discussed. It is a multi-year deal that will not only help the Cleveland Cavaliers in their pockets, but it gives Tyrese an extra motivator to figure out what his process is going to be like when he arrives in Cleveland. And I think that's extremely important, especially when we talk about a player that was selected at number 58, like Saliou Niang, who is still going to be stashed, drafting stashed, as we consider it in these terms. And he's going to play in Italy, right? It's a great situation for a player that, as Mike Gansey described him, he might be 21 years old, but he's actually like 18 or 19 in basketball years. Chris, what did you learn about the situation with Saliou Niang and what he's going to be dealing with and what he's going to be doing to help elevate his game? And is he going to be a similar situation to Job, who is still overseas in a Spanish league? And they're both from Senegal, Chris, and I don't think that's by coincidence either.
Well, the Cavs have a deep roster of executives, of scouts, and they many of them have an international flavor to them. So this is a team that, whether it's signing a free agent who may want to come over to the NBA, whether it's drafting a player, um, they have done their homework, they have done their research, they have watched these guys in person. And I think from the Cavs' perspective too, Ethan, given their current roster makeup, part of the reason why so many people had a conversation about, are the Cavs going to move up in the draft? Are they going to move back into the first round? Are they going to move up higher in the second round? Is because a lot of people looked at the Cavs situation and they said they can't take on 2 second round rookies. Right now, they don't have an open two-way slot. They're still trying to figure out what they're going to do with their 3 two-ways. And this is a team that's in win now mode that needs to keep those open roster spots for veteran minimum type contracts, quote unquote ring chasers, more ready players at this stage. So I think that's part of the reason why a lot of people around the NBA were like, what are the Cavs going to do with those 2 second round picks? Are they going to package both of them and move up to the first round? Are they going to move up higher to the second round? Because everybody understands this situation. Well, the other option in that whole equation is draft somebody and stash them overseas. If you don't have room for them right now, send them somewhere else where they can be your guy. You can have control to some degree over the development. You can keep tabs on them. You can still try and tell them different things that you want them to work on, and you can feel good about overseeing their development in a different kind of way. And you just don't know if the guy is ever going to come to the NBA, when he's going to come to the NBA, but the rights that you control. So that was always another option for the Cavs in the situation that they were in. And Niang is somebody that the Cavs liked. They brought him in for a workout. I'm told that he impressed with his effort, his motor, his athleticism, his size, his length, and his defensive tenacity. And that's what he is. On offense, There's just no offense to speak of at this point. He made 11 threes in 45 games internationally. He had more turnovers than assists in all the games that he played internationally. So he's a moldable ball of clay on the offensive end. And maybe it comes, maybe it doesn't. Everybody will say the same thing. The three-point shot is going to be his swing skill. It's probably going to be the determining factor on whether he ever makes it to the NBA or if he stays overseas for his career, because it's just not there right now. There's just not a lot of stuff there offensively. But there's a belief that it could be. He was most improved player. He helped his team. He helped his team win at a high level. He got better as the season progressed. He got better over the last couple of years. General manager Mike Gansey talked about his improvement in such a short time. So I think they looked at it and they said, all right, let's just take a swing on upside. If we don't have room for another second round rookie on this roster, if we don't at this point have an open two-way slot and we're still trying to figure out what we're going to do with those 3 slots, let's just take an upside swing on somebody internationally. Let's stash him overseas, and let's see if we can develop him into something. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But the idea of Niang, if the 3 ever comes, if the offense ever comes, the idea of Niang, a long, athletic, multi-positional wing, that theoretically makes sense.
When we talk about these players that are draft and stash, right, it's all about upside. It's all about the trajectory of these players and what they could be. And we know that the Cavs had players like Jetty Osman, Luke Travers, Jop are products of that. And obviously, as we mentioned earlier, Jop is still in that development phase. But Chris, I want to stay in the present right now and figure out what the Cavs are going to do with their two-way guys, Exhibit 10 contracts, free agency, what it looks like for this offseason, knowing that they now just signed somebody to a multi-year rookie contract and obviously trying to figure out what they're going to do in free agency. But most importantly, Ty Jerome, Sam Merrill, where there's going to be spaces for them to try and improve their roster and how limited they are in this situation. Obviously, as you recorded late last night, the Cavs have already signed one player to an Exhibit 10 contract, Chaney Johnson. What does that say about how the Cavs are going to operate throughout the remainder of the summer?
I think the thing that it says, Ethan, is that they're open to different possibilities, but they also understand the situation that they're in. For the most part, if you feel good about a particular draft and you feel good about some of these undrafted guys, then you do the work in advance to make sure that you have an open two-way slot to give to somebody. If you think back to a couple of years ago, as soon as the draft ended, the Cavs jumped on Craig Porter Jr. They didn't do that last night. So I think it tells you that the Cavs are still evaluating what are they going to do with their two-ways. Do they want to keep Imani Bates on the two-way? Do they want to keep Luke Travers on the two-way? Probably. Do they want to keep Naquan Tomlin on a two-way? They have guys on two-ways already that they like. At least they like enough to not open that spot, that theoretical spot last night, and jump into the two-way market. We saw as soon as the draft ended, a bunch of different guys going a bunch of different places. Utah, Toronto, the Los Angeles Lakers, because they had a theoretical two-way spot open and they had somebody that fell all the way out of the draft, the Dallas Mavericks, fell all the way out of the draft that they wanted to get their hands out and they wanted to bring into their program. It's clear that the Cavs didn't view it the same kind of way. So they're still in wait-and-see mode. They're still kicking around various opportunities. And I think there are a lot of layers to the NBA draft, not necessarily with these draft prospects, but the other layer to the draft for the Cavs when it talks about off-season planning and stuff like that is, okay, where did some of these younger draftable players go? And what does that mean for some of the more veteran players already on those rosters? And this isn't a situation where around the NBA or in Cleveland, you have this young rookie that comes in right away and it's just going to take the place of somebody else and replicate the kind of production that that veteran player already had. But in terms of team building ideas, like we said, we looked at Jalen Tyson last year as an eventual replacement for Karis LeVert. Tyrese Proctor could be an eventual replacement for Sam Merrill, Ty Jerome. If you think about what New Orleans did, if you think about what Phoenix did with all of the bigs, Phoenix, especially with all the bigs, right, that they drafted or they traded for. What does that mean for a veteran like Nick Richards? What does that mean for the Cavs maybe filling their backup center spot that way via trade, as opposed to a veteran minimum contract in free agency? Portland drafted a bunch of bigs, right? What does that mean for Robert Williams? What does that mean for Duop Reith? These aren't big players, but those options via trade now exist a little bit more. And those options via trade are probably a little bit more appealing than going the free agent route and starting to convince yourself why Mason Plumlee could be a good signing, why Andre Drummond could be a good signing. So those things are things that the Cavs are going to have to consider. And I think the other thing that we have to talk about when it comes to Tyrese Proctor, it is clear. A couple of years ago, the Cavs had the 49th pick, and they used it on Emoni Bates, Ethan. And Emoni Bates was a guy that the Cavs didn't give a multi-year contract to. They didn't give an NBA roster spot to. They signed him to a two-way contract. They wanted him to develop out of the spotlight, away from the cameras, behind the scenes, for a variety of reasons. But part of it is because he's not Tyrese Proctor. He's not the caliber of prospect that Tyrese Proctor was. So there's a difference in terms of Proctor's readiness, what he accomplished at the college level, and how he's viewed from a skill set standpoint and what could potentially translate to NBA basketball. And they like him enough to give him that multi-year contract. They like him enough to give him an NBA roster spot. But that doesn't mean that he's going to come in right away and replace Ty Jerome. And it doesn't mean that he's going to come in right away and replace Sam Merrill. And it doesn't mean that the Cavs are saying, well, we don't have to deal with Ty Jerome's free agency. We don't have to pay him in free agency, or we don't have to pay Sam Merrill in free agency. It gives them another option if Sam gets out of their price range, if Ty Jerome gets them gets the kind of money that he probably wants for the first big payday of his career, coming off a career year, coming off a year where he was in the sixth man of the year conversation. So if the Cavs get to a number, or if Ty can find a number that makes the Cavs a little bit uncomfortable, then the Cavs are looking at it saying, okay, it's a blow and it's a loss because Ty's really, really important to us. But we have this other young player behind him that we like that could maybe down the road take some of those minutes and maybe down the road fill some of that ball handling role, some of that playmaking responsibility. So I don't think you overreact in any way to the 49th pick or the 58th pick and you start making these sweeping declarations about Ty Jerome, Sam Merrill, and about the Cavs' free agency plans. But it's all a domino effect when it comes to team building, and it's all part of how you look at the overall picture of your roster health and your salary cap health and all that kind of stuff.
And you mentioned the mold of clay and how Sio Niang is a guy that you can mold into whoever you want to be, basically, because he's still learning the game. Well, at the 49th overall pick, you come on to a certain team with certain expectations and you don't know exactly what the team is going to have. Then you come onto the roster at the end of the summer into training camp, and Kenny Atkinson goes, this is the player you got to be to get minutes. And we saw last year with Jalen Tyson coming in the day after he got drafted, knowing that for him to get minutes on the Cleveland Cavaliers, he was going to have to improve defensively. That's what he was saying. So they make it extremely clear to these
Right.
players what they need to do to be able to have success, not only on the NBA level, but for the Cleveland Cavaliers specifically. But Chris, I want to end the podcast with this. I think the Cavs and Cleveland are becoming a hub for international talent, not just players born overseas, born in the different ranks and coming overseas to play the game. But we talk about Donovan Mitchell being Panamanian. We talk about Matthew Dellavedova being Australian. We talk about obviously Luke Travers, Jetty Osman. Now we got Saliou Niang and Tyrese Proctor, right? And I wrote about this for the cleveland.com site today about how this is becoming a melting pot of Cleveland, right? You get so many different aspects, you get so many different players and so many different fields. And we talked about the Luke Travers situation and how he could be on a two-way, he could get elevated to an NBA standard contract. Who knows what the Cavs are going to do? But the fact of the matter is Tyrese Proctor's coming into an organization that has a set relationship with guys who have dealt with or been in the same shoes that he has been in. And I think that is the most valuable asset that the Cavs and the Cleveland organization has continued to nurture, right? Because this is a team that has been built on value, built on growth, built on development. And it happens at the core. It happens in the locker room. Sure, the organization is great. But when you talk about guys that can relate to everything that you've been through, that helps you to an entirely different level, right? And it makes you feel more at home. That's another thing that Mike Gansey talked about last night is that this is a family. And the fact is that they want, even if you're a drafting stash, even if you're a guy that doesn't get a whole lot of minutes, you are still a part of this family. And we want you to feel that way. And I think that's extremely important, not only for the Cleveland Cavaliers' growth, but for the NBA as a whole. The league is continuing to grow. The league is starting to have so many more international players. And for players to not only want to come to Cleveland, but also having the experience and the representation when they arrive, I think that could be seen as being different from some organizations. But when we talk about the Cleveland state itself, it just feels so welcoming and it allows different players to have an experience where they feel like family, they feel at home, and they don't have to come into a situation of unknown because if there's players there that have that same understanding, or there's players of the past, or there's players of the future, as we mentioned, Saliou Niang could be coming over. And if he does, there's players like Luke Travers who are right there who have done the exact same journey to help him along his way. I think it's a meaningful portion of what the Cavs are doing and where the NBA is going.
I mean, think about this though. Like think about this. I mean, the late David Stern, this was his vision. To make the game more international. And Adam Silver, now the commissioner, he's continued that as well because he wants to make the game more international. Last year, you had the French influence on the draft at the top of the draft. You think about this year, you've got 3 or 4 of the top 14 picks with an international flavor to it. I think part of the reason why the Cavs and some of these other teams around the NBA, why they're attracted to the international game is because, a number of these prospects that you're drafting, the college game and the international game, very, very different. I mean, if you talk about some of these prospects that you're drafting, they're already playing professionally. It's different than college. They're playing professional basketball against guys who have been NBA players, could be NBA players. The age demographic can be very, very different. You could have one 21-year-old sharing a court with a 29 or a 30-year-old, and the preparation and what's required of you overseas to be a professional basketball, it's just different than college. It's a different kind of game. It's a different level of physicality. It's a different attention to detail. It's a different focus. It's just different. And I think the Cavs and other teams around the NBA are looking at it saying, hey, some of these international guys are more ready to play right away because of everything they've been through, because of the coaching that they've gotten, because of the mentorship that they've gotten, because of the physicality that they've taken, because of the professional basketball that they're already aware of, that they've been playing since they were teenagers. And I don't know. I don't know if Niang is going to make it. I don't know if Luke Travers is going to make it. But I think they took the right path to prepare themselves better for NBA basketball. And I think Tyrese Proctor, coming from Australia, what do you say about Australian basketball players? There is a label attached to those guys, and you say they're tough, they're physical, they're mentally ready when they get to the NBA. And you can say the same thing about Tyrese Proctor. You know, there's a lot of different comps out there for a lot of these different prospects. And I've seen on the low end for Tyrese Proctor, Landry Shamet. I've seen on the middle end for Tyrese Proctor, Andrew Nembhard. On the high end for Tyrese Proctor, I've seen Derek White. That kind of skill set, he molded that in Australia. And it's just a different level of readiness, I think, that he comes to the NBA with potentially than some of these other guys out of college. And I think the Cavs value that. And I think other teams around the NBA value that too.
We talked about the Cavs needing ready players and players that they hope can make an impact even in their first season. Well, even though Tyrese Proctor is not 24, 25 like the guys that we were projecting, he has different mental awareness that is going to help him along his way. Not saying he's going to jump in and make an impact right away, but he has the build and the mindset that could be helpful for the Cavs in year one. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.